Brought to you by Telehelping, a virtual assistant staffing company for professionals.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cody Hall. I am the host of The Faces Entrepreneurs Are People Too and the founding CEO of Telehelping, a virtual staffing organization and the herein sponsor of my life and podcast. So thank you so much for Telehelping for allowing me the opportunity to talk to Amer. Amer, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm living the dream. It's sunny. We're finally getting warmth in Michigan. So we're moving in the right direction. It just took until, almost halfway through June. But
He's like, I saw a sun ray today. So it broke through the clouds. That's
I
so
opened up
funny.
my windows. Yeah, I'm like, I'm ready. We got to get this pool going. Yeah.
I'm excited for it. Well, sir, before we jump in too much, because I'm just doing some maintenance on the pool here as well. So before we get too crazy, tell us, who is Amer? Who are we speaking with here today?
Yeah. So I am the president and CEO of AgileTech Accounting. And so I lead a virtual firm. I can dive into the more professional aspects in a bit, but more about me as a person, right? Because I'm not just an accountant or a CFO, but I have two beautiful baby boys. I've got a 5-year-old who turns 5 on Saturday, and then the two turning 3-year-old will be 3 in July. Married to my wife, been with her for 10 years, and just enjoy spending time with the family, golfing, playing a little bit of Madden here and there, stuff like that.
Okay. I like it. I also have a child coming up on 3 this year. And so he's coming into he's so big. Sometimes I forget he's not 3. And so I forget he's only 2 years and 7 months, but he's so large that, I'm already like, shadow boxing with him and everything. And my wife's like, hey, guess what? Gael came and punched me today because you've been boxing with him.
Like,
I was
oops,
like,
I didn't
my
think about
bad.
that.
Oops. But no, that's great. So I love chatting with entrepreneur family men and women. We have a great mix of folks who come on here because really what we're here today is so many of our followers are folks who want to start a business, folks who are trying to start a business, or folks who are running a small side hustle, small business, and trying to like find the balance. I think it's hilarious because one of my good friends who I was in the Marine Corps with, he owns a really large security company here in Vegas. I'm like, hey, if you ever watch my podcast, right? And he's like, yeah, I did. I was like, and he's like, it's not for me. I'm like, what do you mean it's not for you? He's like, listen, I live those problems every day. I don't want to hear someone else talk to me about their problems. He's like, my wife's a therapist. I'm not.
Fair.
I was like, fair. I was like, but I love it because we get to chat here. I'm sure. How long have you been running the remote firm?
Oh, God. Well, it was a side hustle for like 4 or 5 years before it became the full thing. And now
Exactly.
I'm about a year of being all into it now. So.
I love it. Ooh, and I think what a really cool thing is, how did you make the decision? Like, okay, I'm doing this thing over here, right? And now I'm going to leave this paying job that puts food on our table and allows us to have a house with my family and my wife. And then I'm just going to go for it, right? Tell me about how that decision went down.
Yeah, that was it was stressful. So um it was very stressful. I had done like 7 or 8 years in public accounting, so doing like audit work, tax work, all that stuff. And every like 1.5, 2 years, I would jump around jobs and I found some excuse like, oh, I didn't like the team, I didn't like the clients, they weren't getting me the opportunities that I wanted, whatever. What it really boiled down to was I like to be more in control of what I work on, who I work with, because I've had experiences with clients where it's like they walk all over you, the partner lets them walk all over you, and the partner walks all over you. And I'm like, I don't want this for myself, nor would I want this for any team member that I'm ever going to work with. And so like all these things started coming together. I was like, I want more control over my schedule. I don't want to work 70, 80 hours a week anymore. I'm tired of this. I'd like to see my family. And so, yeah, I finally buckled down. I was like, okay, so it's not the firms that I'm working at because I've been at 3 or 4 different firms now and I'm still jumping. Then I said, all right, well, let's try to go industry. I'll go and work for a company in their internal accounting department. Hated that worse than public accounting. um, it just was not my cup of tea. But it was the same themes that kept coming up, right? I'm working a lot of hours. I have no control over what I work on, when I work, how I work, the types of projects that I'm getting. It's just you get handed and you go. And then I finally said, all right, we're going to start taking this a little bit more full time. Started doing some promoting on LinkedIn, some posting, whatever. But my full time employer found it and they were not happy with my attempt to create a firm. So then they were pretty much like, their thing was, we don't know if you're spending your time that you're supposed to be working on our business on your own business. So now we
Fair,
want you to come into
right?
the office. Yeah, I get it.
Fair.
So they were like, we want you to come into the office 4 days a week now so that we can kind of keep an eye on things, whatever, make sure that like you're doing your work. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is even more so up the micromanagement thing that I was not
Yeah.
a fan of. So I was like, all right, this is it. This is the time to just pull the plug. We gave the employer 2 months of, hey, find somebody and I'll help train and replace them so that I'm not putting you guys in a bad position. And then we jumped ship and started pursuing the firm full time.
No, I mean, I love it. At telehelping, right? One of our key elements of our very, very long contract with our virtual assistants is they can't have outside employment, right? Of any sort. And if it's detected that they do, right, we will either mitigate because I always say, get rid of people. It's easy to say, oh, we have to fire them. Well, we can just ask them to stop because, most of our people are pretty critical to the staff, right? Imagine if you had
Mhm.
someone with us that was an accountant. They worked with you 2 years and we found out they had their own little side hustle. Like, we have to ask ourselves, like, okay, well, they've been working with Amir for 2 years. They're doing a really good job, right? They have this thing on the side. Is it impacting this? We have to make a discretionary decision, right?
Yeah.
We've had it where, it's mostly always marketing people though, because marketing people also are notorious for freelance work as well. Right. And we had one guy who was actually working on my podcast. And I was like, man, it's always taking him, a little bit longer than I think it would to like turn these videos around, right? Because we usually like doing it in a week's time. Like, we record on a
Yeah.
Wednesday. This baby better go live next Wednesday, right?
Mhm.
But it was always taking longer. I was like, what's going on? It turns out he had his own little side hustle, right? And I was like, hey, listen, respect. I had no animosity towards him. I said,
Yeah, of
but
course.
in my world, I have to focus on what is important to me, and it's how fast you get my videos edited. and so, and
Right.
so, and he was great about it, right? Much like you were. And I think I think that if you're listening, I think that's the direction you should take as a business owner. Wouldn't even be mad at you. Work up into
Yeah.
the time where your side business starts impacting the performance of the people you're working for, then cut it, right? And then
Yeah.
then because one day it will happen to you and someone will be working for you and you'll have to make the same type of decision. So do unto others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was the thing too. Like I understood their perspective, I understood their concerns, and I just, hey, you guys need something. I am not in a place in my life because I have too many obligations and responsibilities. Like even working in the office 3 days a week was a challenge for me because it's really just me and my wife and 2 kids. We don't have a ton of support. We don't have a ton of babysitters or anything. So it's like if she needs help with something and I'm in the office, I'm now not available. Now, granted, if
Correct.
I'm at home and I'm in meetings or whatever, I can't be available anyway, but I'm more available, right, throughout the day to help out, to come out, get some lunch or whatever. So I think, for us, like for me and the employer that I walked away from, we both saw like, hey, it just doesn't make sense. It's not fitting on either side. So let's do the professional thing so that we can walk away with clean separation and,
Yeah.
everybody's happy and moves on to what is better for them.
Respectable decision. And I
Yeah.
think that's what matters most. My wife, she takes things personal, right? Because we own some restaurants and some rental properties and stuff. And she at large, I say my wife, I always joke about like I don't joke, I'm very real about it, but I say it in a joking manner. I'm like, listen, you manage X amount of a P&L, right? I'm like, this is because my wife's like, oh, I want to, do you need help at telehelping? I'm like, no, dear, you are managing X thousand dollars a month as a P&L regarding restaurants and rental properties. Like you have a full book, right? I need
Mhm.
you to focus on these. And but when something happens in those things, she takes it so personal, right? Oh, so and so, had something come up, right? A common thing with her once was a visa application. She had a guy recently who got approved for a visa in Mexico to go to the United States, and he had to go to his visa appointment, and so he called out last minute, and so I was like, well, you got to understand, right? While it created a hardship, right? He had a greater priority in getting that visa. So
Yeah.
turns out he did not get the visa and he did not have a job to come back to. However, that's the coin you flip.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes sense. Yeah, I
It's
mean,
so
my
funny.
wife is she runs a business too, and she's it's funny. I heard the part about her asking like, "Oh, can I help with telehelping?" My wife is constantly like, "Oh, well, I can help you with billing. I can set up, schedules and calendar appointments, whatever." I'm like, "No, you run a small side business. You have a part-time job that you do once a week. Plus, you have these kids. Your caseload is full. I promise. I look at capacity often for my team members, for myself. Your caseload is full."
Oh, that's so funny. I mean, that's the truth. And my wife, when she asks me to do something, because I approach things, I'm very passive aggressive, right? And I find passive aggressive as a good way to mitigate my otherwise very aggressive approach to everything. Like I'm a very aggressive person. So passive aggressive is me actually working on myself. And it's me
It's
working
an
on myself. So
improvement.
it's an improvement, right? Because you don't want to be aggressive. It's acceptable to be passive aggressive. And so I always tell
Yeah.
my wife, like, hey, I need you to do this. I'm like, great, all for it. Do you mind taking my meeting? Right. And she'd be like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not taking your meeting. I'm like, great. In that case, I'm going to suggest we consider an alternate approach to this other thing you have me doing. Right. And so
Yeah.
like my mom lives with us. So we're lucky to have that. My mom's also
Mhm.
disabled. Right. And so, she needs someone to live with. So here I am. But we also take advantage of having an extra set of hands around the house. And I tell my mom all the
Right.
time, like, hey, listen, right? Someone needs to do this because it can't be me, right? And it can't be
Mhm.
Teresa. And if it's not you, I have to hire a nanny. And then can't hire a
Yeah.
nanny right now because I have you living in the house. And
You're
so
right.
so I'm like, you see what I'm doing here? She's like, well, all you have to do is ask. And so, it's one of those, man, it's such a balance between the household and running a business.
It really is. Yeah, it's like because at least when I was working for somebody, when I did get off of work, I could be like, all right, you know what? This isn't my problem for the next 6, 7 hours until tomorrow when I log back onto work. Now I log off and I'm like, everything is still my problem. Everything is my responsibility. It might be 2 in the morning. If a team member messages me, now granted, I'm probably not going to see it at 2 in the morning, but if I was up, I'm probably going to read it to at least see like, is this something that needs to be addressed? Is this a big issue? Is this whatever? I need to work on being better about that. But, everything is my responsibility now. So yeah, I can't, just, oh, well, I'll stop working so that I can come and support X, Y, and Z around the house. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you gotta take that one.
No, I mean, and when you have a family, right, and you are basically running a small company, right?
Yeah.
You're consuming resources, you're producing products, you're managing teams, right? You're
Hmm.
trying to fit to a schedule. And so like and I don't think that for those who listening, if you don't have a family, it's of no consequence to you yet, right? But when I was a single entrepreneur by myself, right? I didn't have to feed anyone except my dog, right?
Yeah.
And so, I rarely forgot to feed myself sometimes. And you could burn 18-hour candlesticks and be like, right? No one's
Yeah.
interrupting you. You're just in your little apartment or condo doing your thing. But when you have a family, I can't do anything between 7 and 8 a.m. because that's when my 2-year-old is going to come cannonballing out of his room, right? To wherever I'm at, right? It's happening.
Mhm.
And so you have to, it's really a balance. And so you're right. When you work for someone else, it's like, hey, listen, I can't take a meeting before 8 a.m. because I have 2 children who are going to need me, a wife who's trying to wake up, who I actually have to support in this transition period. Versus when you own your own company, it's like, oh, I want to do a sales call at 7. I need this new client. I'm going to go ahead and take this call.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, ooh, sorry. I know this is gonna be rough for you, Caitlin, but you're gonna get up with the kids because I've got the sales call. Got to make it work.
Correct. No, I love that. And so when you started your own firm, did you kind of just get straight into like CPA work? Or are you doing just bookkeeping work? What's your mix of your product there?
Yeah, so our focus is really on the CFO, like consulting side of things, fractional CFO work. Now, we recognize that with that usually comes the extra baggage of the compliance aspect, the bookkeeping, the taxes, stuff
Of
like
course.
that. So we do offer the full service. We've got a whole team. So pretty much like when I bring on a CFO client, I am providing them with a full outsourced accounting team. They're going to have a bookkeeper, they're going to have a senior accountant slash controller type person, and then they're going to have myself as the CFO. So yeah, I mean, when I first started, I was all three of those things, right?
Of
I
course.
did all the roles. I'm the CFO, bookkeeper, senior accountant. Now that we've grown, though, we've added on more team members and whatnot. Now we actually have separate, distinct people for all of that, which then allows me to focus more on being a CFO and advising my clients on their strategy. Oh, you're in this situation. Your goal is to do 5 million in revenue. How do we create that roadmap for you to get you there? And not just, oh, well, I'm doing $3 million today in revenue. Here's this pretty forecast that says 5
Yeah.
million now. How do we get an actionable plan of, okay, we're niched in ABA therapy. So clinics working with kiddos with autism and behavioral health issues. So then my roadmap says, okay, you want to get to 5 million from 3 million. How many kids are you at now based on your billing rates, based on their programs? Are they in your clinic full time? Are they there half time? And what do we need to add over the period of X years to get to 5 million? So that's
Yeah.
been really the focus of what we're trying to accomplish in the firm, but then also knowing like you got to have clean, supportable books to even have these types of discussions with clients.
No. So absolutely. And I myself am an educated, I have a Mac from Syracuse. And so
Mhm.
never intended to ever be a CPA, by the way. Right. I just had
I
a
don't
board.
blame you.
Right. I was the only one in my group and like, who's going to take the CPA exam? And I'm like,
Not
I
me.
did it because I had a board member tell me that I was horrible with numbers and that when as a young entrepreneur running a startup, like you are a little bit of everything, right? And so you are
Mhm.
the CFO and everything. And if you can't read a P&L or a balance sheet, right, and pick up on like this doesn't look right, right? That's a problem. And that was my problem. So that's why I was like, after I exited, I was like, I'm going to go back to school. And then I learned it and I'm like, I'm going to data dump all this. And so, but, I get to do a lot of consulting for our clients at Teleupping. Not a lot. I actually could do a lot more, but I try to limit it because also have to run a company. Um, it's needy as well.
You're right.
So I
Basically a
generally,
kid.
it's practically a teenager. I call it a 13-year-old girl all the time, right? When it's
Oh,
great, it is great. And it's big enough to be an adult, but it's also 13. And so,
yeah.
um, so, I call it that, but, I get to do some consulting. And recently I was working with one of our accounting clients and they offer full suite for a specifically niche organizations. And, they're right. They come in and they're either helping people who are just trying to get over a glass ceiling, right? Because in their industry, they see companies and they're in the blue collar industry, the contracting industry.
Okay.
They're seeing folks who are doing like 300 to 500,000. And they're like, I don't understand why we've been here for 4 years. Right, because they've been doing all the same things that got them from 0 to 300 to 500,000. And they don't realize that there's a shift that has to take place to go from 500 to a million. And oftentimes that is managing your money. Right. And
Mhm.
so, people who have smaller business, they use their business as sometimes in an external bank account. Right.
Yeah.
I'm put gas in my
I
truck
see
from
that a lot.
this. I'm gonna pay my rent with this. It's my office, right? All this type of stuff. They're like, well, I don't understand why I don't have money for advertisement, right? Or why I don't have money to hire the additional person or pay myself.
Mhm.
And it's because, well, yeah, you're spending it somewhere else. And so,
Yeah.
or their ratios are off. A huge one is like, oh, I'm dumping money into Yelp and their cost of client acquisition is super high and they're getting one client every 5 years. And so, those type of things, you need someone when you don't know that type of work to come in and say, hey guy, let me clean this up so we know where the money's going. And then let's figure out what ratio's off. Like it's like running, you talking about
Mhm.
medical clinic. It's like running a full panel on a business. Like, let's see
Yeah.
what numbers don't match.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, almost every prospect call I have with a new client, I'm like, okay, so, what accounting system are you using? What's your familiarity or understanding level if I put your financials in front of you? And every single one of them tells me, I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't think it's clean. I don't think it's accurate. I couldn't read it even if it was accurate. And it's like, I wish there was like, before you start a business, there's like a, hey, accounting 101, just so that you can read and understand financial statements. Um, because it's such a critical part. Like that's the question they're all asking ultimately is, I've been in this position for X period of time. Why can't I get over this hump? And when I ask, okay, are you reading your financial statements? Are you reviewing to see where your money is going? No. Well, how can you? Because for anything in business, anything in life, right? You can't just jump into big decisions, right? I want to grow my firm from 500,000 to 750. Okay, well, what does that mean, right? It's not going to be free. You can't grow a firm for free. So what do I what do I have, what costs am I going to have to get me there? What activities do I need to do and what are
Yeah.
those going to cost me to get me there? And do I have the people to accommodate it? And then do you have like the cash reserve to do it? Because business is wildly unpredictable. Maybe it seems like, oh, well, if I continue to collect X amount of dollars every week, we can continue to meet this. But then all of a sudden COVID happens and you shut down and you don't have money, or you're terminally sick for like 2 or 3 weeks and you are the primary revenue driver of your business, you no longer can do this expansion plan. So it's like just getting ahead of it and seeing, number one, looking at your financials, seeing where you are now and what do I need to improve to get to that point.
No, I mean, and for folks running smaller businesses as well, it's when you're the only thing in your business, it's scary, right?
Mhm.
Because if your sales, your marketing, your operations, your finance, like you're all those, and something happens to you, all those departments are down, right?
Yeah.
They're now down. The business is paused. And then, in an odd, morbid conversation I had with my wife recently, and she's like, I wouldn't know what to do if something happened to you. Like, what do I do with telehelping? Right. I was like, we're about telehelping will run itself. I was like, you simply call the COO and you tell her that coach Cody has died. So, right, or whatever has happened to me, right? And they'll run the company, right? They'll take care of the company. The company will keep going, right?
Mhm.
And then everything else, it'll keep going long enough to figure things out, right? It's not going to run itself forever by itself without some type of person coming in and leading it, the executive position. However, it'll give you
Right.
enough time to, come back and say, hey, we're not going to take on new clients right now. We're just going to continue maintaining current clients, or hiring freeze until we figure out what's going on, right? Like, enough about business to make those type of, calls, and then just pause. And that's important because, you know, telehelping is our primary, we have tons of other smaller revenue sources for our family, right? But
Yeah.
it's the primary business. It's the thing I wake up for every day. And so, having it drive it's a scary thought process. If me, single income family over here, technically, I see us as a conglomerate, a little, it's a scary thought process. Like, what's going to happen if
Yeah.
something happens to me? But many people don't think about that, right? Especially if you have a family and you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah. No, that's been a big focus point for me lately because as I'm thinking about agile tech, like, we have folks in place. I have a senior accountant slash controller. We have operations folks. But I think about like what's the primary driver of our revenue at Agile Tech? And it's the CFO service. And so if something happens to me, I'm the only CFO in the company right now, or at least I'm the only one servicing like our higher package ones.
Yeah.
So it's like if something happens to me, 75% of the revenue doesn't have somebody to service them. So now I'm trying to think of like, okay, how do I position Agile Tech to get more CFOs in here who are experienced and can continue to run it and ultimately pull myself out of servicing clients regularly. I'll probably always keep 2 to 3 clients because I do enjoy the consulting aspect of it.
Me too.
But I'd like to see this be something that can run itself, at least in an interim period before, God forbid something were to happen to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really big thing. I do enjoy consulting very much. I just love, and I feel like telehelping, and I'm sure you do too, because we are in interesting businesses. We get to be intimately involved with someone else's
Mhm.
business, right? And so your numbers and people, right? And so those two things are what's driving an organization, right? Do we have the money? Do we have the people? And then, core strategies in there, right? But,
Yeah.
you know, I get to sit down, and when we're hiring someone, it's like, talk to me. Like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? What problem is this person going to overcome for you, right? Is how we look at our placement. Many people in the BPO space, they come in and say, we're going to drop this on you. Here's a person from our stall, right? And we're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, sure, we could do that, right? We probably could charge $8 an hour, but we don't. All right. And so we get to be involved. And I love consulting because I get to go sit in someone else's business versus telehelping. People don't pay me for my opinions. If they ask me, I'll give it to them. I love giving
Yeah.
people the advice and perspective. But I usually maintain 2 to 3 consulting relationships, right? Any more than that, and I don't have time. But I love dropping into other people's businesses and being like, this is great, but we got to do something about this. And
Yeah.
so I don't know what we're doing over here. And sometimes it's nice to make decisions without consequence in a little bit of a sense, because I work in
Mhm.
marketing and sales consulting, right? I come in and help very unmarketing people do marketing stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you're a very accountant person or a very lawyer person or engineer, you're like, I have a great company, but I don't know how to get clients. Like, okay, let's build you the base blocks. Like, I love doing that and then setting them off on their way, right? Give them the
Mhm.
tools and then move on to the next one. And that's cool because you get to meet new friends with former people I used to consult with. And so it's kind of like my way of friend circle, basically. But it just keeps you fresh. So I like that you have that approach too. Like, even if it also, I'm sure it'll keep you apprised of your business too. Like, it'll
Yeah.
give you tentacles down into the business that you otherwise wouldn't have if you sold 0 clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'll always see 2 to 3 clients. And then the other thing too, like even as I back out, like I want to drop into those client meetings periodically where the other CFOs are leading things. But I think more of my value proposition for Agile Tech is in being strategic, finding new ways to improve our service offering. Is our standard up to standard enough, right? Like just developing
I
the
love it.
tools to make sure that we're providing a quality service. Because ultimately, like the vision of Agile Tech is to modernize ABA clinics who may not have had access to this level of accounting support and CFO support with these tool stacks, with these insights and whatnot, because I mean, they're just as complex as any other business, right? Like if you look at Ford, Ford can tell you the cost of every tiny little part on their cars. They pull up their bill of materials. This screw cost me 2 cents. Well, they know these costs. But in the ABA world, especially like a lot of the people in the ABA world are clinician, an ABA company or some kind of setting. And then they said, all right, I want to start my own business now,
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. And they just don't have access to the tools and resources and technology or even know what to look for. So that's where like I come in and I have a ton of fun on the consulting end. I'll do a quick little tangent here. I never
Please.
thought I would enjoy consulting. I'm very introverted, and I was always like, I want to be behind the numbers and just do the numbers, send it to somebody else. Then once I started getting into it, I was like, oh my God, this is so much more fun and enjoyable for me. Like I'm learning so much about my client's business, how they run things, what tech stacks they're using, and then helping them optimize them. And to see that light bulb in their head when we have a plan, it's like, oh, this is how we fix things. Like that's the ultimate kicker, right? Is just satisfied client, helping them turn
Yeah.
things around.
I love it. And yeah, I never thought I'd do a podcast either. Fun fact, I never watch any of my episodes. I hate listening to me speak. Like, once I record it, I will never watch this again, just because like I listen to myself, I'm like, you idiot.
Yeah.
You sound so stupid. No, no, that's great that you have that approach, because you really have to. And clinics. I used to work on, so I used to own a healthcare company, but before that, I actually was head of operations and then eventually a compliance for a healthcare company. So I used to do the merger and acquisition of clinics, primary care clinics, specialty clinics,
Mhm.
cardiology, and everything for a larger practitioner association. So it was a fun job, but man, the complexities of medical money is,
Correct.
it just like, people don't understand, like, you can be a CFO, and I've seen this happen poorly, bringing outside people who aren't familiar with the medical world into the medical world, and then, how they do their accounting. It does not. You have to have someone who knows what they're doing, right? Because
Yeah.
you can't bring a tech guy in healthcare and like, oh, we're just going to book all this as this, and like, actually, we can't do that because of
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z reasons, right? This is Medicaid money. This is Medicare money, and so no, that's great that you have that perspective. And Amir, out of curiosity, what is your heritage? What is, I see you got a little bit of a red beard,
Yeah.
right? Right. I'm like, well, what we working with here?
We're a little bit all over the place, but primarily Palestinian, and then
Cool.
we've got some Irish in there. That's where the red is coming
I
from.
see
A
it.
little bit of French. Yeah, we got some Polish in there. We got all kinds of stuff mixed in, but
So
primarily like Polish, Irish, and Palestinian.
that's great. My brother, he is a red bearded guy himself, and if I grow mine out long enough, it'll start looking a little, as I would refer, Afghani. Right? It's
Yeah.
dark closer to my face, but it's red the further it gets out. And so
Okay.
I learned that about myself as I grew out my beard once, and I was like, oh well, look at this. But I thought I was a mixture of all things for a while there, because I have such many different people in my family. I'm like, I don't know who these people are and whose bloodlines which. Turns out I'm just
Yeah.
Irish, right? I'm just I'm like 98% Irish. And
Like,
so
well, I thought I had all this stuff, and
I thought I had
nah.
all this stuff. I joke with my wife all the time and tell her I'm his, I'm from Spain because I have 1% from Hispania, and I'm like, yeah, I'm Mediterranean, right? So,
Yeah, as a
oh
whole
man,
nother culture
a
added
whole
in there.
nother.
Heck
There I
yeah.
am. There I am. And so that's a great, Amir. Well, Amir, I think that you're a fine example of someone who's taken side to primary entrepreneurship and then been able to, though I say you found the balance, and it's a constant maintenance, right, of life, family, and work. And so it sounds like you have a decent grip on it, right? It's never perfect, right? But it sounds like you have a good balance with you and your wife. So, sir, I appreciate you giving me your time today for this podcast. I think there's so much of it that people will find applicable, especially as many of the folks listening are ones who are deciding, well, when do I kind of rip that plug and jump out of this airplane, right? And so
Yeah.
I thank you for that, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. You too. Yeah. Thank you for the time. I had fun on the podcast, and yeah, I'm sure we'll be in touch at some point soon.
Oh, absolutely, sir. Well, be well, man.
Thanks. You too.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.